This video is brought to you by Squarespace.
Hey, indie filmmakers, I'm Nick Bodmer.
I'm Griffin Hammond, and today Nick is going to help me understand the landscape of AI-generated imagery, how it's already disrupting the art world, and how it stands to potentially very much disrupt the video world coming soon.
It's crazy, Griffin. Have you seen much of this? I know I sent you a few things, but how much have you looked into these new tools that generate artwork and images kind of out of nothingness?
Well, I've been following it for months on Twitter with people sharing the images they've generated through these various tools. You got me onto a tool, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I feel like we've wanted to talk about this for like the last few months. And I feel like even if we had done an episode a month ago, it would already be outdated today because the technology keeps advancing so dramatically. I mean, it looks like the stuff I'm seeing this week is already leaps and bounds better than what I was generating most recently.
It's pretty amazing, and it brings with it some very interesting ethical conundrum questions, copyright questions that I don't think our laws are currently fit to address, which is always fun, right? When technology outpaces things like that. So,
well, we could even talk about copyright real quick, because I think it kind of, for people who don't know what this is, it kind of sets the stage for like how this is being created. Because like we're talking about software that is generating imagery based on prompts given from users. So generally, what is your understanding of who does have the copyright here? I mean, there's not a person making...
I think the person who types the prompt and hits enter, just like pushing the button on a camera makes you the person who owns the copyright to the photo. But again, it's all untested. Who knows, right?
That's a good allegory, is like when you click the shutter, copyright law does support that you are the owner. So like the person who takes a selfie, even if it wasn't their camera or they're not a good photographer, it doesn't matter. They push the button. So you don't think like
potentially if someone sets up a camera and gets it perfect and does all the timing, and then the person who just walks up and clicks, I think is the copyright owner.
They may
as far
be
as
the
we
copyright
know.
owner.
Who knows? We're not lawyers, right?
People do fight about that in court, and I think it has occasionally gone to the person who did set it up. But yeah, a lot of times just the act of hitting the shutter itself. I mean, there was a case a while back where like a monkey was clicking the shutter, and I think PETA fought the photographer and said, actually, it should be the monkey making all the money from this. So your understanding that
too well for the monkey.
These software companies, or the people developing these tools, aren't generally claiming like we are the copyright owners, we generate all this.
That's a good question. Now, so there are some that there's open source tools like Stable Diffusion, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then there's private companies doing this, and they may have terms and conditions that alter this. Because some of these run locally on your own computer, and some of these run up on server farms run by big companies. So it's a good question. I don't know. But what's more interesting than that to me is the way these, and I'm going to dramatically simplify and probably get some of this wrong, but they're training these artificial intelligence models against just tons and tons of data, right? So they've got all these images that are tied to various pieces of text that I don't know if they've pulled it from the web. Different companies have different ways of generating these huge sets of data that they train these AI models on.
Right.
And so that's led to some interesting things where like you literally, like the best results you get is when you put in this text prompt to create the image, you'll put in like an artist name, like a current living artist who's doing work, and then you get something out that looks like what they would make. And so some of these artists are saying, hey, you used all my images without my permission, to train this AI model, and now all this artwork is floating around that looks like I made it, but I didn't. Right. Is there, even if there's not a copyright issue, is there a moral or ethical issue with, taking someone else's art? And you hear good arguments on both sides, like all art is kind of based on the impressions and what the artist has seen before, in their past. But
it
now
sounds
it's a computer,
less problematic.
Right?
It sounds less problematic when it's like an artist who's no longer living. If you say in the style of Van Gogh, big deal if it looks just like his work. But for a living artist, you are potentially destroying the market for their own work, but if anyone can create their look.
So tons of interesting stuff here. What I think is crazy is I've already seen some video made with these tools where they're using these tools to generate frames for like animation and stuff, and it's accelerating so fast. We'll have to put some images up on the screen just to show how impressive some of the output of these tools is. Now, I've played around with it a bunch. Most of the output I get is not very good, but the people who've learned kind of how to write these text prompts properly, and maybe 1 out of 100 turns out like amazing. So and the fact that you can generate so many so quickly means it doesn't take long to kind of hone in on something that is working really well. I know a few months ago someone writing, I think it was for, what's that New York magazine called that everybody reads?
Is it New York Magazine?
Maybe it's New York Magazine. Anyway, he was an author for a real publication, but it was for like their email newsletter, and he used AI tools to generate like his hero art for that, like the main image, which normally he just uses like Getty Images or something like that. But this company is known for hiring real artists for their actual magazine. So there's big outrage, like this big magazine company is getting rid of real artists and just going with artificial intelligence, and artists are losing their jobs, and the details of it weren't quite that, but there's going to be a lot of questions and issues. Is this going to put all artists out of business forever? I would think no, but that's the kind of stuff that's getting debated. I think it's very interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean my reaction to the extreme viewpoints that people are sharing, or they're worried that like this is going to upend everything, it's going to destroy art. I mean, that's like, you hear that debate historically every time, like the printing press is going to destroy.
When the camera was invented,
right. But I guess there is what's different about this is the speed at which it's going to change very quickly, because I saw this technology guy on Twitter, Ethan Malik, was talking about like the S curve that this kind of technology follows, that it kind of like ramps up slowly, and then like we're like now on like the steep part of the ramp. This is gonna like shoot all the way up to like making it a viable product versus just like a silly thing that people are playing around with.
I think that's absolutely right. What's interesting is I started hearing about this quite a while, maybe a year ago. I don't know. There were like some beta versions of these things that like you had to like get on a list to try out. DALL-E 2, I think, was kind of the big one I first heard about, and that's been out for a while, but they kept it. They were trying to kind of control it. They were worried about the ethical implications, and they were being, I think, reasonable in their caution as they deployed it. And then came along this thing called Stable Diffusion, which is open source, and they just kind of dropped it on the world and let everyone go wild with it. And then so some of these other companies that had been doing it more slowly kind of were like, well, if we don't open up now, we're just going to get left in the dust, right? So everybody kind of opened up all at once. The one I've been playing with is called Midjourney. Yeah. And it's really interesting. The entire interface, if you go to their website, all it is you get an invite link to their Discord server. So like, like Discord for like chatting while playing video games, basically, text chat rooms. That's the entire interface. So you get dropped into a chat room with, 15 other people, and you just type in your prompt, and then you wait 30 seconds to 60 seconds, and out comes your image. And it seems weird, like, why would you do this in a chat room? But it turns out the social aspect of it, and seeing what other people are typing and what their results are, is like really juices the creativity, and it makes it way more interesting than just playing with it on my own computer, where I just try and think of something and I can't think of anything cool, and I just end up generating pictures of dogs. You see the crazy stuff people are coming up with, and you like learn how to write your prompts better and different ideas to try. So it's actually kind of an interesting story about interface and how that kind of changes everything. So
that does seem super valuable.
It's free,
because like I think when I come to this looking to write prompts, I'm immediately just like, I don't have the right kind of creativity for this. I've always said that I don't I'm not good at like blue sky creativity where like you can make anything. I really need to be boxed in before I can be creative. I'm creative like within the limitations of like, where am I allowed to film? What is the story we're capturing? And then I can start to make decisions about sound and lights. But yeah, when you just put me in front of software and you're like, make anything, I just clam up. I can't think of anything. And so I probably would benefit from that.
I think a lot of people are that way. So I think you should definitely jump in and try this out. Now, I think it does start to cost money. They give you some number of free generations, but it's fairly reasonable. I don't want to say like $10 a month, and you can do quite a lot of stuff. But I think what's really going to be interesting is, in addition to these text prompts, now you also have the ability to feed it an image and then give it some text prompts, and it will kind of take that image and alter it. And so you could like give it a picture of Griffin and say like Griffin as Iron Man, and you will probably get out a picture that looks like you in an Iron Man suit.
Interesting.
Like as if it was professionally done. And I think as those kinds of tools start to get better, I can see that. Like you can imagine Photoshop where it does like, you know, like where you can delete something and it like tries to figure out what to fill in.
Yeah.
Like this is going to like superpower that kind of thing. And as the processing gets better.
Photoshop already has a bunch of AI tools that they've started to add to the suite over the last couple of years. And so, yeah, I just assume they will make their own version of this or buy Stable Diffusion or something. You know, I can imagine them incorporating some existing technology into the software.
So I maybe Premiere next before we start to see it in our video tools. Yeah. You know, I mean, the ability to do effects and things like that, I think is coming. So keep your eyes open because it's going to get crazy, I think.
Well, the one I was playing with that you recommended I download like 2 months ago, or maybe it was even longer ago, was Diffusion Bee. And I'm looking at the photos that I generated with that. Like Pete and I just sat in front of the computer. I think the only good one I made, the prompt is called a cute, fluffy, chubby marmot sunbathing on a pile of rocks, snow mountains background, turquoise glacier lake afar, clear blue sky, highly detailed, golden hour, natural light, octane render, Unreal Engine, .png is the export.
And you gotta love these. So these text prompts have crazy things like octane and highly realistic, and that's just because the model was trained on these things it saw out on the internet, right? So if those words appear in their source images, it kind of tells the generator like what you're going for, and I think that's fascinating.
Well, and I feel like I probably just copied that prompt verbatim. In fact, I maybe didn't even come up with the idea to make a marmot. I think that might have been entirely someone else's prompt, which
what the generated heck is a marmot?
It's like a little.
Is that like a prairie dog or something?
Gopher or otter looking animal. I bet it was someone else entirely wrote this prompt, created their own image, different image, and then I was able to create my own image with the exact same prompt. And then Pete and I went through and like he wanted to see a bunch of cats and he wanted to see tractors with harvesters. He started to get very specific on the kinds of harvester he wanted to see. So he was getting kind of disappointed that Diffusion Bee couldn't fully do it. And the tractor ones look kind of weird. Maybe Stable Diffusion is not trained on enough tractor photography. These ones look kind of off.
Well, we should try it on Midjourney and see, because I actually kind of like Midjourney's results a little better than the Diffusion Bee one.
Well, and that was my experience.
And Diffusion Bee, I should say, just before we get things too confused, Diffusion Bee is just a application that runs on Macs with M1 processors that does Stable Diffusion. So Diffusion Bee is Stable Diffusion. It's just kind of like a nice, easy interface. So when I first got Stable Diffusion, I had to run it on my PC with my NVIDIA graphics card, and it was all command line, and it was kind of difficult to use. And Diffusion Bee is like a nice application with just you start it up and type in something and click generate, and you get an image back 60 seconds later. So it is a form of diffusion or of Stable Diffusion.
And I assume these pictures I made were back in this was 2 months ago. I assume Stable Diffusion has advanced. And I know Midjourney, which at the time, 2 months ago, I thought it did look like Midjourney was producing better content, better results. And it is a paid, you need to pay to access it. But they just released a fourth version of Midjourney, right? Like this week?
They did. Very recently. I don't know exactly when, but.
And I thought I saw, aside from I mean, I'm already seeing people online showing examples of how much better it is. Like that guy I mentioned, Ethan Malik, he has a tweet here that's just a bunch of pictures of an otter using Wi-Fi on a plane. Is that his prompt? His prompt was otter on a plane using Wi-Fi. And he has 8 different images here that all look perfectly passable. I don't know if these were the first 8 he made or if this is 8 out of 64 he made. But any of these could stand as the hero art in an email about your story about otters using Wi-Fi. But just for reference, he shared an image, like the same prompt that he did like a month ago, and it doesn't work very well. There's like otters flying outside of planes. So just comparing his 2 tweets, he seems to think that version 3 of Midjourney, or version 4, is a huge leap forward.
And they just keep getting better and better and better. That's what's amazing. I was listening to an interview with the CEO or the founder of Midjourney. He's a fascinating guy. It was on, I think, the Decoder podcast, which is on The Verge. Very much worth checking out if this stuff's at all interesting to you, because the way he thinks about this stuff and the way he talks about, how they're using chat and stuff like that, I found really fascinating. So let's remember to put a link to that in the notes.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely worth checking out.
Well, and I also saw, when I saw headlines about version 4 of Midjourney coming out, it sounded like they solved some potential ethical issues or legal issues. Like I thought I saw that it no longer allows you to put artists in the prompts. Is that true?
That I don't know. I know they've been making a lot of changes, and these companies, like, they try and make sure, like, they don't want people trying to generate deep fakes and things like that.
Yes.
So they are building in these kind of, walls around it so that they can address some of those ethical issues. The thing is, so much of it, like with Stable Diffusion, which is open source, even if they put in, I think Stable Diffusion by default does not allow pornographic type images to be generated, or at least tries not to. But it sounds like it's fairly trivial to create a version where that is not
right.
not in there. And you can imagine how that can get very tricky, especially when you combine that with the ability to, use someone else's real image and do something with it. There's going to be a lot of ethical problems that come out of these tools.
Well, yeah, it'll certainly be even stronger copyright infringement when you prompt the software with an existing copyrighted work, and then it creates something more interesting or different, but it's based on an actual copyrighted work. Like surely I have to imagine courts would look at that and go, that's still problematic. That's still an infringement.
Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Who knows? That's it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. It's going to be messy. It's going to be contradictory, but I think it's also very exciting.
Maybe you can explain to me, like, so when I download Diffusion B to my Mac, it's using my processor to generate these images, but where is it going? Where is it looking to draw from its source learning?
And now I'm going to get slightly out of my depth, but I'll try and do it from a high level. But everything I say, grain of salt.
Yeah.
The hardest part of this is what they call training the model. Okay, so there's this thing called a model, which is what actually generates all these images. And to train a model takes months on supercomputers, basically, right? Like I think I heard him say, the Midjourney guy, when they were doing like version 4, they started training like 5 months ago, and it's just now being done, right? And they're using like tons of high-end cloud computing GPUs and things like that. So that's what's looking at the source image set and the data and kind of comparing it and doing all the AI stuff. So the really hard part for artificial intelligence is this model training. It is incredibly CPU intensive, and it takes a really, really long time. And then, but what comes out of that is a model that actually does the work that it was trained to do, and that is much smaller. I think the Stable Diffusion model is like 3 or 4 gigs, so still big, but not massive. And that's what allows it to just work on M1 Mac, which has a bunch of local AI processing. They call it the neural engine, I think, and it follows that model. And
so
it's
are
much
you saying
simpler.
When I download Diffusion B, am I downloading the full 3-4 gigabyte model? And then
if you go download Diffusion B, the app, the very first time you launch it, it's much smaller than that. It's a couple hundred megs, I think.
Yeah.
But the very first time you launch it, it says, okay, now I have to go download the latest model. And it downloads that. And that's like 3 or 4 gigs. It takes a minute to download, obviously, depending on your internet speed. And that's what gets updated, right? So when they say version 3 or version 4, that's the model that's changing. It's a new version of the model.
And then once the model's on my computer, can I shut off my internet and it works?
Absolutely.
It's not. So it's not looking into the cloud for anything.
Does not.
I see.
Nope. Now, Midjourney does. Midjourney runs everything in the cloud. In fact, apparently they use a fairly large percentage of the total GPU power available in the cloud right now. Like they're using a lot.
And this is why you're paying for Midjourney, because
GPU
you're not
capability.
really doing anything on your computer aside from accessing
Correct.
Discord and typing in a prompt. That's the only
Right.
interface.
That's all running in the cloud.
Yeah.
Which is why it's also quite a bit faster than running it on your computer. Usually when they're not overloaded. So
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
It's all fascinating.
I'm starting to understand
recommend. Yeah, I definitely recommend go play with these tools because, I mean, it's just amazing. And I really like Midjourney just because you can go watch what other people are doing. You don't even have to pay to do that, right? Like I'm just in one of these chat rooms and there's just images flying by and they look awesome. So it's pretty cool.
You know what space this really could disrupt, like right now, immediately, although maybe book publishers haven't sorted out the legal implications yet. But I mean, you and I both have young kids, and so we've experienced like how many just terribly produced children's books there are. I mean, there's like a whole industry of just like buying barely relevant stock photos and filling a book. Like, I want to write a book about pumpkins, so I'm just gonna go download like the 12 cheapest pumpkin related or people related photos I can find from a stock library, and now I've written an entire book. But it's like the photos are never like stylistically similar. It's just like, I can't believe how many children's books are out there that just seem so messy and like
they're just garbage.
Yeah, just garbage curation. But it's like anyone could write a children's book right now with rich imagery and illustrations, just entirely
that
generated.
Are stylistically similar.
Yes.
Once you settle in on a prompt, yeah, absolutely.
And you could do nonfiction. You could do
in terms of the ability to create, unique art.
Yeah, you could do a whole fantasy book. I mean, you could tell any story you want and make something beautiful out of this.
Yeah.
And I suppose you could very easily do that with video right now, just in like a slideshow sort of format. But the technology will eventually get there where you're generating whole... I imagine the same kind of prompts we're putting in now. We could just say, I want it to be 24 frames a second and 12 seconds of this happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Similar to what you just said. So are you familiar with the children's song that's, the kookaburra sits in the old nut tree?
Yeah. Gumtree, I think, right?
Gumtree, you're right, yes. Well, I, just like that, misquoted it as the capybara sits in the old gum tree.
Yeah.
And everyone laughed at me. And so then I went and generated capybara in a gum tree. And I just thought I was hilarious, so I'll share those images with you. You can share my capybara, where it like literally the capybara was part of the tree. It was interesting. So,
well, and you're like, see, it's canon now. It's the image exists. It's real.
I'm writing a children's book about the capybara and the gum tree.
I would have a lot of fun with Pete just writing his own book. He could write whatever he wants, and he could generate the images. I'm not claiming at all to be an expert on this subject, but I am telling you I'm fascinated by it, and I think the audience will be too. So definitely, you got to go check this stuff out because it is changing crazy fast. It'll probably be different by the time you watch this, but it's an exciting space, and just to kind of see it all happening out in the open is very interesting as well. Yeah. So yeah, we'd love to hear everyone's feedback too in the comments on YouTube. Or if you just want to email us, I'd love to know if you all are doing anything interesting with AI-generated images for your own work.
Should we thank our sponsor today?
We should.
Handy Filmmakers is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your filmmaking business.
whatever kind of artist you are, whether that's an illustrator or a video producer or even just a prompt giver to AI generation tools, you probably need a website to share your portfolio and show off what you're capable of. I love my Squarespace website as a place to share all the video content, photos of myself in action. They have commerce tools so that I can sell everything that I sell. It's an all-in-one platform that lets me put myself out there, develop my personal brand, and have one landing place where people can understand everything they need to about me.
Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Griffin to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
I should give people an update. What was it, 2 episodes ago? We talked about whether or not I should go to Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And I will.
Drum roll, please.
I said yes.
He's going. You didn't give me a chance to do the drum
Sorry.
roll. It's about to start banging on my desk, but okay. So you're going to Zimbabwe. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so I have to, I already had a couple people reach out, send me some messages saying that they live in Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe, and they may want to join me. So I actually have some dates now for anyone who might live in the area, either near Harare or the other big city in Zimbabwe, Bulawayo. If you're in either place, I'm going to do a 2-day workshop specifically about election filmmaking, covering elections, covering presidential elections, really specifically. And let me see, what were those dates that we came up with? It looks like these are still tentative, but you could put them on your calendar if you're around. It looks like I'll be in Harare on the 6th and 7th of February next year, teaching the first of 2 2-day workshops. And then I'm going to do another workshop in Bulawayo on the 9th and 10th. And I think the State Department has some local organizations that are going to source the people that are coming to these workshops. So let me know if this is something you want to do, and I can try to get your name to these organizations and see if you can join us either in Harare on the 6th and 7th of February next year or in Bulawayo on the 9th and 10th. So yeah, just message me. You could find me on Instagram or Twitter, or you can email me at griffin@hey.film.
Fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to go generate some AI images.
Yeah. For profit.
For fun and for profit.
You got to start publishing something.
All right, my friend. Yep, we'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye. You can hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear the robot vacuum outside my door? Go away, robot. I'm going to pause the robot.